Hi everyone, and welcome to our first webinar called How to Create Marketing Content That Sells. I'm really excited to do this today. This is our first of hopefully many series that we'll go through as part of the Small Business Bootcamp. And so let's get started with today's topic around marketing content that sells. So the first thing that's important with marketing content that sells is there's three key areas. The first area is attention getting, the second area is insights, and the third area is a compelling story. So now we're going to go through an example of attention getting. We're going to walk through the structure of this is going to be very similar throughout the rest of this presentation, where we're going to give a good example and a bad example and explain why we think one is good and the other isn't as good. Attention getting is all about grabbing your audience in the first second, and you'll see in this clip from Dollar Shave Club, they do it in a very creative and somewhat irreverent way. But it's also, one would argue, very attention-getting.
Hi, I'm Mike, founder of DollarShaveClub.com. What is DollarShaveClub.com? Well, for $1 a month, we send high-quality razors right to your door. Yeah, $1. Are the blades any good? No. Our blades are f***ing great.
As you've seen in the Dollar Shave Club, you can use a very in-your-face, abrupt and disruptive style, and that is also very attention-getting. There are four key elements in attention grabbing: a compelling story, well-designed material that makes your audience want to interact with you, and a smart user experience or understanding. So it shows, and that we'll get into that's our next topic, which is about insights, which talks about that user experience and knowing your target and knowing how they would react and how they would perceive what you're about to communicate. So the next example is a very bad example of attention getting.
Head on, apply directly to the forehead. Head on, apply directly to the forehead. Head on, apply directly to the forehead. Head on is available without a prescription at retailers nationwide.
Obviously, head on, what was it, it's something that could run in the background 1,000 times and you wouldn't even notice it. Another good example of attention grabbing is the example from Old Spice.
Hello, ladies. Look at your man. Now back to me. Now back at your man. Now back to me. Sadly, he isn't me. But if he stopped using lady-scented body wash and switched to Old Spice, he could smell like he's me. Look down.
Okay, so as you saw with Old Spice, it's very good at attention getting, especially at the time when it was launched. This was a very different view of the brand. As we've gone through these two examples on attention getting, you can see the difference between what Head On could do and what Old Spice did. Writing content that sells is more than just grabbing attention. The key thing is keeping that attention. And how do you keep that attention is by making sure that your ad has a very solid insight. What is an insight? In fact, insight is all about knowing your target. If you don't know to whom you're speaking, you can't speak to them in a way that is meaningful to them. So it's really understanding why they're coming to you and what's the emotion driving them. Is it fear? Is it lack of knowledge? Is it I want to belong? What is the emotion behind that? So that you can connect with them on a deeper level. Why on a deeper level? Well, think about it. If you solve when you come to someone at a crisis point and you offer them a lifeline, these people are obviously drawn to you. And once they're drawn to you, you have a relationship, you have a bond that is harder to break, and it's harder for competition to break. And that's when you know you have an insight, when you know something's happened, you throw that lifeline and you get an immediate response, okay? So it's something that is so important to this person emotionally that you can get that response. I'm about to show you one of my favorite ads. It's old, but I think it's amazing from an insight perspective, and it's an ad from Subaru. And Subaru is a car that targets, adults with children, and this is a beautiful ad that speaks to how a father might view their daughter when she's first going to drive, and why safety and reliability and longevity of a vehicle is important in that context. So let's watch the Subaru ad.
So your seat good? Get the mirrors all adjusted, you can see everything okay? Just stay off the freeways, all right? I don't want you going out on those yet. Just leave your phone in your purse. I don't want you texting.
Daddy, okay?
Okay. There you go. Be careful.
Thanks, Dad.
Call me, but not while you're driving. We knew this day was coming. That's why we bought a Subaru.
In the Subaru ad, it's more than entertaining and engaging, but it really touches on how parents see their children at the point in time when they're giving them the responsibility to drive their car. They're always dad or mom's little boy or little girl within that context when you're first giving them this machine that you're afraid that they could hurt themselves. This advertising really touched on the insight and therefore allowed this emotional connection with the father or with the potential buyer who is a father. The next example we're going to show you is another amazing example. Samsung did a wonderful job on really playing up a weakness on the iPhone, and that weakness on the iPhone has been battery life.
There they are. Hey. Clustered around power outlets, near the recycling bins. Did you jiggle it? Stained carpeting and bathrooms. Tethered to the wall.
Oh, come on.
Denied the freedom to enjoy even the most basic things. Like grabbing a drink, or sharing a laugh with your coworkers, or sitting with someone you know.
Says the new iPhone's coming out soon.
Hope it has a better battery.
Totally.
You're stuck here until your battery says so.
Really?
After all that time.
I gotta plug in. You come in?
Actually, I'm okay.
Are you changing your battery?
Yep.
Is that the new Samsung?
Yep. Have a good one, man.
Don't be a wall hugger.
Sorry.
Get ultra power saving mode and interchangeable battery on the Samsung Galaxy S5. The next big thing is here.
Okay, so now we're going to show you a not so good video about an insight that almost was. This ad is an ad from Evian. You may or may not have seen it. I do think it's attention grabbing, but it shows you how far attention grabbing can really take you.
Let's observe the effect of Evian on your body.
Come on, say the hip hop, you hit it to the hip hip hop, you don't stop the rocket to the bang bang boogie, say up jump the boogie to the rhythm of the boogie to beat.
So the three key elements of an insight are: 1, a true understanding of the target's experiences and needs. As we saw in Subaru and as we saw in Samsung, those were both good examples of two manufacturers that really had their finger on the pulse of what their target's experiences and needs were. The second is to connect on a deeper and emotional level. I mean, clearly, both those ads from the car, you clearly connect on the emotional level of daughter and father, and that coming of age moments. Wall huggers clearly connects on an emotional level on the real disgusting places you might have to stay to plug in your phone. And many of those users had to have those experiences. The third key element is gets an immediate and visible response. And I think if you are on that target, if you've ever had to plug your phone in an inconvenient location, you got it. And you've had an emotional reaction to it, like, oh my God, that's me. Some may or may not, if you have children, you probably have had that experience where your child's come to a point where you've had to let go. And then also you'd be like, oh yes, I totally understand how this person is feeling. So to have a good communication, you have to be attention getting, but you also have to have a very strong insight. Okay everyone, so now we're going to touch on the last point that we have in today's webinar, and it's about storytelling. So you might think, ads, storytelling, why is storytelling important? Well, storytelling is important because people are hardwired to love stories. So why do you think most oral histories are stories? Why do we all remember fairy tales? Why do we remember, Goldilocks and the Three Bears and all those wonderful stories from our childhood? Because they were compelling, they engaged us, they told us a message, and we felt included in that world. So let's talk about this in business. We've all gone to business presentations where, someone comes in with a very logical approach. We come in with our 40-page PowerPoint deck, and we come in and say, hey, here's the executive summary, here's what I'm going to tell you, tell them, and then tell them again. So that's the typical Proctor way of doing it. You know, let's be fair, you lose people by slide 3, and it sets up an adversarial environment where you're trying to sell them versus enroll them. Now, there's the other option, which is the emotional storytelling approach. And the emotional storytelling approach I've seen be so much more effective time and time again. And this is the person who comes in with 3 slides, not 40, 3. Same ask. That person comes in, puts the first slide up and says, you know, I'm here today to do X. And then he or she sits down for the next 10 or 15 minutes and tells a story. Tells a story about why this project is important, how this project and what the challenges it faces, how the people in the room can help him or her solve that problem. And by doing so, emotionally engaging them in the story, so that when the conclusion comes, they're ready to say yes, instead of ask questions and be a little bit more adversarial. They may still ask questions, but they are much more invested in the story now because you brought them along. So now we're going to show you 2 examples of storytelling. One is a bad example of storytelling by Bill Gates. The other is a good example of storytelling by Mike Barbiglia. In the interest of time, we're not going to show you these 2 videos, but we've included links in case you'd like to watch them later at your leisure. All right, so now let's talk about storytelling and how storytelling is put together. We're going to go through 2 models today. One is the classical model, and one is the modern model. Both models have value in today's world, and we're going to go through each of them one at a time. So first, let's look at the classical model. The classical model is the classic Shakespeare, the classic Greek tragedy, where you start off with a rising action, it comes to a climax. Once the climax hits, there's a decreasing action, and everything is resolved at the end and put in a nice bow. In the modern model, it's slightly different. There's usually an incident which leads to some conflict that increases to a climax that causes a decision to happen. But where we leave people today is with a cliffhanger. Is not complete resolution of the problem, but resolution to the point that you want to see more. Let's talk about how these 2 models can work for us today. If you're in a pitch presentation, a business presentation, any type of presentation where you want to have a close at the end, close with a decision, close with a deal, close with anything, I would argue that the classical model makes the most sense because it does close with a strong resolution. If you are developing content for which you want your users to continue to be interested in seeing more, I would argue that the modern model makes more sense because each episode doesn't quite end with a resolution. It ends in a point that says, oh, I need to watch the next one so that I can get to the resolution. It's this suspended resolution that keeps you going rather than a nice close at each point.
Great.
In closing, let's go over the 3 key points. Attention getting is the headline. Simple as that. It's how you draw people in and hold them for that first second. Your insight is the next step, and it signals to your audience that the story you're about to tell them is relevant to them. The story is how you hook people in, and it's how you get them to want to come back. Thanks everyone for attending our first webinar. Over the next 3 weeks, we will be sharing content on Small Business Bootcamp for those of you that might not be doing TV ads, to show how these tools can apply to anything that you do in marketing and any type of content that you use to sell your products. Also, we welcome you to reach out to us, either to myself here on LinkedIn, reach out to us at ProStrategix.com if you have any additional questions or want any more information. Finally, I want to invite you all to come back in September. I'd love to see you again, where we're going to talk about the pros and perils of working in the gig economy. So until then, great talking with you, and speak with you soon. Bye now.